Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, yes, they did. They absolutely got it right. And yes, you are here again on Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty works for you. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, joining you again, and you joining me to talk about what is truth. What is truth, and how does that work for us? We have seen constantly this week in the media with the sad events of what happened at that high school in Florida, with the fact and the realities of what I'm going to talk about today. And I know I'll never get any pastors listening to this program, because pastors, what happened in Florida is nothing to do with gun rights. Is nothing to do with guns. What happened in Florida this past week is what does not happen at the pulpit. Okay? You know what? I'm not a big Charles Finney theology perspective, because I am a Reformation-minded Calvinist in the true sense of those Reformation fathers. So that's my total theological framework is there. But what I can tell you is that when Finney did write and speak and say that the issues that happen in our culture and the issues that happen in our politics, if they go south, and again, I'm paraphrasing Finney, if they go south, it's all on you at the pulpit. So that's where I'm starting. And I'm starting there because what we're also going to get into is just all the frustration that I and you, my listeners, and the viewers here, continue to have when it comes to all the gobbledygook, all the blah, 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 blah that's happening in the media. I want to focus on a blog post that I put up on Thursday morning. And I titled that blog post, Immigration, Invasion, Insurrection, and Constitutionalism. And I started out with this cry and saying, issues, conspiracies, scandals, deceptions, collusions, immigration. And go through this. It's a whole blast of all the rhetoric, that we hear from Congress and how there's, all the way through into the administration that's trying to stand on solid ground, but it's an incomplete administration because we cannot get decent people into the various positions. I had spoken with a individual in the administration at last year at some point in time, and he clearly, and I think I talked about this on a program last year as well, he clearly identified that there are not enough qualified people to bring into the administration. And not that I'm not qualified. I am qualified to do a lot of stuff, but I'm not qualified because I haven't been in government service in certain areas, or in the political realm in certain areas, to qualify to move into helping out in the administration. Once again, I say that's on the pulpit. And why is that? Because we have rejected what I'm going to talk right here in James Madison in a moment, and what he said, and that what John Adams had said as well, is that in modern America, since the 1900s, if you will, we focus so much on the outward looking, and not saying that being missionaries isn't important, but you know what? I think there's a false sense, a wrong sense from that Calvinistic perspective on what is the Great Commission. And I've seen some really good modern work on that lately as well, to the extent that we have forgotten what it means to have people that will be of moral, Christian, ethical values to participate in governance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk today about what's happening from Federalist 41 through 45. Obviously, not able to get through all of it. But what I want to take you back to is something that I mentioned out of Federalist number 43 last year in a couple different programs. And it was a questions that were posed at the end of 43, talking about the delicate nature presenting themselves on the occasion on what principle the Confederation, which stands in the solemn form of a compact among the states, can be superseded without the unanimous consent of the parties to it. And 2, what relation is to subsist between the 9 or more states ratifying the Constitution and the remaining few who do not become parties of it. Now, you know what? If there's any deacons, church leaders, elders, and I'd be surprised if there's any pastors listening to this program or watching, listen to what Madison has to say. Yeah, it's my old trusty handy-duty, Federalist Papers. Listen to Madison. And this is very, very critical because, you know what? I have read the pastors of the Revolution, and there's only a couple here in America that come even anywhere close to preaching what needs to be preached for true liberty application in all of life. So here's what the expectation that Madison has on this first question is answered at once by recurring to the absolute necessity of the case, to the great principle of self-preservation. Here's what it is. Listen to this. To the transcendent law of nature and of nature's God. Okay? Transcendent law. All right? Which declares that the safety and happiness of society are the objects at which all political institutions aim, and to which all such institutions must be sacrificed. That means all political institutions must be sacrificed to that transcendent law of nature and of nature's God. I've talked about this over and over when we look at the layers of sovereignty. It's not just about being a sovereign nation, folks. It's about how we view that sovereignty of ourselves and how God is sovereign over us. And then what does that mean to have his sovereignty in every aspect of our lives? And that then means how is it applied even in good governance? The attacks that we see on Christianity right now, the attacks that you see with these whiners, skaters, athletes, and everything else that are the media sets up as these idols, the problem is that they do not understand the sovereignty of God first. Hence, they do not even understand the sovereignty of self-governance. You have to be a moral person if you're self-governed underneath the sovereignty of God, under his word, under his authority. My goodness gracious. How does that work? I guess you're going to have to find a good Bible-teaching pastor. Not just a good Bible-teaching pastor, but a pastor that knows what that means in the cultural mandate. That's something that, Calvin talks about. That's something that is in there through the whole Reformation. Oh gosh, even Luther talked about that in a cultural mandate. And now, the perversions that we have in all of the major denominations, to the extent that, there's some evangelical Lutheran group that has a transgender, first off, the women pastors, and now because this woman thinks she's a man, they're giving her a name and saying that she's because she's choosing Peter as her transgender name, so now she's like Peter, and they're saying that this is all like Peter and Paul. Man, is that ever messed up? Ladies and gentlemen, that's messed up. And so when you have that all messed up, and you don't have the Ten Commandments in the schools, you don't have discipline. You know, when I was high school, I got out of line. I got my ass cracked by a paddle by a teacher. And guess what? So did the girls. You got out of line. You got a crack. You know what? I don't see any of my classmates going out and shooting people. And you know what? Hunting was a big deal. Shooting guns was a big deal. Training and having marksmanship classes in grade school and in high school was a big deal. You know what? What's up with that? Instead, we have this, it's mental health. No, it's not mental health. It's spiritual help. It's spiritual health. Yeah, they need help. They need the mental help, because it is all about what's going on spiritually. So when you pulled the Ten Commandments out, and when you took discipline out of the schools, and you put in all this yappy, happy, dappy, humanism, materialism, setting up sports people as idols, guess what you get? You get the perversions that are there. And they start where? At the pulpit. Where do all the problems? You got all these guys that are lining up on all this DACA stuff and all these illegals and all these other things and women. And who are they? They represent these other denominations. So they're saying, this is the Christian thing to do. No, not according to the founders' belief system, not according to the morality at the foundation of this nation. It's like I was talking with Kathy the other day. And as all of this stuff was happening and the shooting and everything like that, and, you start going through, there were absolutely problems. And we're going to talk about this from the blog post that I did on Thursday as well, is that there were absolutely problems during that founding era. The problems were we had immoral people. Sam Adams talked about the frivolity that would come from Europe and bring that into our country, the types of plays, just all of those things that would go against a person's good character and a moral established society. And on top of that, we had banking problems, we had debt issues. I mean, that's part of what was in the securing of the debt in the Constitution and how to remediate that debt. We had, just all the downfalls in economy and the potentials for the upswings. There were a lot of things in humanity. And you know what that is? That all those various things in humanity are because, as I always say, Ecclesiastes 1:9, there's nothing new under the sun. God understands that. But he also understands that we're supposed to govern well. And good government is when we come together as a society on common grounds and moral substance. So if we don't have that moral substance first and foremost within ourselves, then you're never going to have it in society. So guess what? I know. I have to go back to Finney and say once again, it's the fault of the pulpit. It is the fault of the pulpit for not being able to take the Word of God as what happened during that first great awakening, and where people saw their need for a personal Savior become extensible then into everything else they did in life. How did that affect their businesses? How did it affect what they did in schools? Well, how did it affect their personal lives, their relationships, their families? What did that mean then also in what is good governance? Sam Adams understood that. Sam Adams was always about the moral good governance. And we're going to talk about that some more from the Federalist perspective as we look at the summation of what I put into my blog post from Thursday. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited that you are here today. And I hope you'll come back in the next segment as we really consider what is good governance and what does that mean from that aspect of Samuel Adams returning and the anti-Federalists getting it right because they knew the Federalists. So come on back real soon, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did get it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network, where Liberty works for you. And as I normally do in this second segment is that I'd ask you to take and go take and check out the other hosts and hostesses, check out the daily programming, the evening programming, and definitely, hit that donate button. The whole thing that makes Liberty Works Network happen is you, the listener, and you get the opportunity. Take a look at what's happening at SamuelAdamsReturns.com, and all of what we have here and the programming going on is going to be on the archive, which you can find is SamuelAdamsReturns.net. And one of the other real fun stuff is that, the new book is just about 2 weeks out. We're still looking at that early March release. We should have later, the first part of this coming week, we'll have the foreword written by Pastor Ernie Sanders, and the cover is finished. I may throw that up here on in the archives. I'll throw up that new cover and a little bit more on that introduction of the book, so you can check that out on the website as well. And so if you want to email me and contact me, is that just go ahead and email Tom at SamuelAdamsReturns.com. So appreciate you taking a moment to look at Liberty Works Radio Network and everything else that we're doing with Sam Adams. What we just went through this past week and the horrors of what happens for families when attacks go on. As we know now, there's much of what's come out about this young man that he has participated and still, and we'll just say, I'll just say it this way, is what the news is saying, what the media is saying, is that he was a participant in a lot of activity that was contrary to what I would say would be moral, founders' original intent for self-governance, let alone for good governance. And that takes me in some degree to, as much as I want to get into all the other stuff that's out there, I think what we need to do is delve into what I told folks I would in the blog post and kind of jump into that. You see, when I posted this on the blog, I did that whole thing on issues, conspiracies, scandals, deceptions, collusions, immigration. Well, that's everything that is spewed all over the media. It's blasted there. And the rhetoric of Congress, the spewing, especially of the Democrats, and their perpetuation of evil is just almost beyond what anybody can stomach anymore. I mean, I really have a hard time stomaching what comes out of the mouths of so many, and even the whole pieces that are coming out of on the Fox networks and all of that is they're not talking about what really matters. Let's get back to the truth. I mean, push out. You want to sell stuff, and I know they got to do it for their advertisers, so they're going to hit on the emotional and twist all that in and together like I talked about a couple of weeks ago. But what's the reality? What are the facts? What's the truth of functional governance under constitutionalism? I talk about that in that blog post from this past Thursday. And when I look at this, that the founders' intention was that, government is not all about what these so-called super lawyers think they know. Because as I talk about here, is that those in the media, there's no way that I believe that they understand the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. There's no way that I believe that they understand the Constitution. And especially, I'll say about the Republicans, they don't, the majority don't understand the Constitution. There's a few in there. There's a smattering. There's, the Liberty Caucus or whatever the caucus is that they want to call themselves, and definitely those that call themselves conservatives. A lot of them are not constitutionalists. What is it that they understand? They don't. That's the point. So the Democrats in particular have gone so far in their ideologies that they are anti-constitutionalists, anti-constitutionalism. And you know what? I'm not the one that talks about that. That's Madison. So you could go to the blog post from this past Thursday. What was the date on Thursday? It was the 15th, I think. Yeah. So you could go to February 15th at the SamuelAdamsReturns.net is where I put the blog post, and you can look that up. So, it's like, how dare I say this about all of these people? I mean, it's like they've given in to and are dependent on the donors and the lobbyists that have thrown the concept of constitutionalism deep in the sub-basement of the Capitol and all the marble bureaucratic buildings. I mean, it's buried at the bottom. The bureaucrats in particular don't get it. They're supposed to be working for you and I, we the people, because, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you a super secret. A super, super secret. You know what it is? You know what that super secret is? Ladies and gentlemen, the super secret is that you are the government. Yeah? You're the government. That's a super secret. It's not all of those people in D.C. and the bureaucracies and the marble buildings. According to the Constitution and the way that it is framed, it is, yes, that republic formation of the states. But because, as Madison, and I've talked about it, especially in the last program, when Madison describes, is the point in fact that because we, the people, had to change state constitutions to allow us as states, people within our states, to become part of the federal constitution. Yeah, you're the government. You own it. So, you know something? Wow, think about this. It's not only the pulpit's fault because, you know what, they haven't kept the morality and the Ten Commandments, and they gave in to the lies and the threats and all of the other insanities of the modernists, the humanists, the communists, and every other ist and ism that's out there to pervert not only our educational system, but the pulpits, the seminaries, which are now cemeteries, and you know what? The universities. We've allowed all of the evil to then corrupt our universities and the bureaucracies. So all of the isms and such, yeah, it was the pulpits that didn't keep the moral order, but think about it. It's on you and it's on me for not fighting for it because we're the government. Okay, Tom, shut up. You're preaching to the choir. What are you doing? Okay, folks, don't go throwing your shoes at YouTube now. I really don't want you to break your computer or your TV or your phone or whatever as you're watching this on YouTube, because especially those that are listening to my program. I know my listenership just dropped off a whole bunch, but come on back on, because the real rest of the story is what Madison has to say. As we get through this and we're going through, I dare say these things because the Federalist Papers alone give the clear intent. Not just the anti-Federalists with all the warnings that I talk about so often, but when you really start to understand what's in the Federalist Papers, it clearly gives us the intentions by which constitutionalism, this republic, and the republics of the states should operate. You go through very, very easily, and you look at things, especially in 44. We opened up with 43, and we talked about that first principle of nature and the laws of nature, and nature is God. So the Constitution is that which is a framework for the rule of law, and the rule of law having substance because God gives substance to law because he is the author of law. Wow. Think about that for a little while. So when we come to this whole thing and we start looking at the ideologies that are out there, especially with the democrats and the bureaucrats and the modernists and so on, they are subversive. And they are subversive ideologies. Why? Why do I say that? Because Madison says it. He talks about that. All right, let's just jump along here and start getting into it because we don't have a lot left in this segment. And I do want you to go read the details in here, but I want to get to something that Kathy and I were talking about when it came to some questions as to understanding the Federalist Papers. You got to realize that, you know what, the people in the revolutionary period of time were more literate than we have today. I mean, just go watch some of those on-the-street programs, and yeah, you laugh, you find them humorous, but the reality is that folks are illiterate. They don't even understand just common language and ideas, let alone ideologies, let alone frameworks of governance. So, okay, let's get on here. Immigration and naturalization. Madison talks about it and lays it out in number 42 very, very clearly, and he talks about things going on with aliens. He talks about the laws, and I'm not going to read it in detail. I'm kind of going to skim over it for you, but he talks about that there's certain descriptions of aliens who had rendered themselves obnoxious, were laid under interdictions inconsistent not only with the rights of the citizens, but with the privilege of residence. Whoa! Stop right there. Isn't that the argument that we have right now going on around immigration? What is it that immigrants have a right to? What is it? Anyway, you get it? You're starting to get it? This was talked about. All right. What would have been the consequence of such a person, being that alien, by residence or otherwise, had acquired the character of a citizen under the laws of another state, and then asserted their rights as such, both to residence and citizenship within the state prescribing them? So what that means is you get California that says, I'm a sanctuary state. Not only on top of that, do I want federal money so that I can be a sanctuary state? Wrong answer. And not only that, now that I got this motor voter thing and I can give these illegal people driver's licenses, and now they're going to go across over to Texas, and no, they want to go to Colorado, no, they want to go to Oklahoma, and now they're going to go ahead and try and get to work there, and they're going to do some work there, and now they're in there as a citizen. Guess what? They're not. And so now they're prescribing things, and the other states are looking at it and go, wait a minute, what's about that? So whatever the legal consequences might have been, other consequences would probably have resulted of too serious a nature not to be provided against. You see, ladies and gentlemen, you can go through the rest of that and talks about what's happening in the confederations, and that is why it is Congress's duty to take and talk about what is a legal resident and what does it mean for naturalization, what does it mean to keep the illegals out, and we're going to talk about that from a point of invasion, and that the right of the state to cry out like Arizona and says, federal government, I need your help. My borders are they're just being flooded. Texas, even California, though they want them. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have to take this all into consideration. But, hey, Madison already addressed it. He addressed that, and let's see, that was Federalist number 42. So you can take and look at Federalist number 42 and look at the meaning of that, the meaning of these extremely intermediate actions, and what does that mean, and the interpretation in which it'll bear, the powers that can happen with that. Ladies and gentlemen, you see, the Federalist in talking about the powers within that are limited powers within the Constitution is what Madison was taken through from 40 through 45. Was to talk about what are those limited powers. And we're going to get into more of that as we come back when Samuel Adams returns. Those anti-federalists, they got it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty works for you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment for today of Samuel Adams Returns, those anti-federalists. Yeah, they got it right. And, so did the Federalist. And Madison in particular, my feelings on Hamilton. To me, anyway, we won't get into Hamilton. He said some good stuff. And actually, Madison was saying some of the qualifiers in 41 through 45 that Hamilton actually talked about when it came to standing armies and when it came to a number of other key components on explaining aspects that needed to be qualified. But when it comes to exactly what are the roles of the federal government and that relationship within the states, I'll trust Madison over anybody else. So we're finishing up, and we talked about in the last segment about the alien issue in number 42, and that was problematic and seen as such, and that it is the absolute duty and requirement of the federal government to talk about naturalization. And you know what? Aliens are aliens. They're illegal. And he even talks about what that means and the problems that it means from state to state. Wow, a lot of problems. And the resolution of those problems are, first of all, is to protect our nation. And remember, as I talked about out of 43, is that the first order under the principles of government is to have the rule of law, because it is of the laws of nature and of nature's God. And so I'll always drive back to that. And under the rule of law that comes from the God being the lawgiver in the first place, and we can understand that through and through, it then is upon us in good governance for what? It is for self-preservation. The self-preservation of individuals. And we come together as individuals into a society for self-preservation, not to take in a bunch of illegals and preserve them. They have no rights in this nation. I'll leave it at that. I won't keep going on. But I just want to hammer back on the pundits, the talk show folks, the politicians, and the bureaucrats. And here's how Madison emphasizes that we are a republic, guaranteeing Republican forms of government in the states. I say that because before I go into here in 43, I am sick and tired of hearing, even on Hannity, Smanity, all of these others, even on Fox, even on some of the other so-called conservative pundit shows, democracy, we're a democracy. I expect that out of the Democrats and the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all those other communist programs, because that's where their ideology is. Let's just call it what it is. They're communist. The point is that when you start hearing it on these so-called conservatives, that makes sense on my book then, that not all conservatives are constitutionalists, because guess what? You can't call us a democracy, all right? We're a republic, and here's what Madison says that guarantees it. He says in 43, to guarantee to every state, and this is in the Constitution, folks, remember this. This is in the Constitution. All he's doing is elaborating on it, because the states and the anti-federalists were questioning, how is it? Because every state was its own republic, was its own government, just coming together in that confederation that ultimately then became the constitutional republic. And he says this, to guarantee every state in the Union a republican form of government, to protect each of them against invasion. All right? We'll pick up on that in a little bit. And on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. In a confederacy founded on Republican principles and composed of Republican members, the superintending government ought clearly to possess authority to defend defend the system against, get this, because this is important in what's happening with the Obamas, the Clintons, what's happening in the bureaucracies, what's happening in the deep state. Get this, is that the superintending government ought clearly to possess authority to defend the system against aristocratic or monarchical innovations. The more intimate the nature of such a union may be, the greater interest have the members in the political institutions of each other, and the greater right to insist that the forms of government under which the concept was entered into should be, and he puts it in bold letters, substantially maintained. Now, I say this, Madison does lay in a caveat here that even the likes of New York, Oregon, Washington, and yes, California can be socialists or communists as long as they maintain a Republican form, which they're doing. You know, they got out of the Senate, a House, they have representatives, still have their elections. So I'll let you think about this because you have to go read that. He says on this, and as long, therefore, as the existing Republican forms are continued by the states, they are guaranteed by the federal Constitution. Whenever the states may choose to substitute other Republican forms, they have a right to do so, and to claim the federal guarantee for the latter. The only restriction imposed on them is that they shall not exchange Republican for anti-Republican constitutions, a restriction which, it is presumed, will hardly be considered as a grievance. So that's where Kathy and I got into a greater conversation, and which can take a whole program in and unto itself. But let me say this. That's why I put in that caveat that under a Republican form of government, as long as the structure is maintained, the likes of California, Oregon, Washington, New York, New Jersey, and some of the others that have gone into the depths of socialism, communism, and all of that, you know what? They can do it. But don't expect the superintending government to go that direction. And that's what we have being pushed by those then elected officials from those communist states, those communist republics, into the general government. Wow. Sure makes a mess of things, doesn't it? And Madison says, well, you know, that's part of the problem that we have, but we're guaranteeing this Republican form of government, and the Constitution does that. Boy, pulpits, where are you? Where are you talking about? There's a book I have, it's called They Preached Liberty. And it goes through all of, and you know, pastors, well, maybe church leaders, maybe deacons, maybe there's some elders or deacons that are listening to this program. Would you please go read the sermons from the time of the American Revolution and understand they preached liberty because they did preach the gospel, and they preached it in a very, very true way. So I'm not going to belabor this point, but one of the points that I'm going to draw out of the beginning of this is that every state has a right under the form of being a republic to be preserved from invasion. Preserved from invasion. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we have had for years upon years, is invasion by illegal immigration. Invasion. Because we've had invasion even by what was talked about here on the aristocrats and monarchical innovations. That's globalist. You know, you can take monarchy out now and put globalist in. So when we take and we look at that, is that we have a right to defend our republic against the aristocrats. That's even the Koch brothers, okay? Absolutely George Soros, but I'm talking about even the Koch brothers and every other billionaire out there or millionaire, whoever they are, that wants all this immigration nonsense that is contrary to what it would be in developing who we are as a republic. So I think Madison is very, very clear on that. But you know what? If you want to be the communist state of California, the Republic of California, as it says on their flag, or the Communist Republic of California, that's what you can be. But go there. And you know what? We could throw the border wall up right along that whole Sierra Nevada border as well. I'm good for that. All right, let's go on to what else I put in the blog. Okay, you can think about that. And, pastors, think about what it really means to preach liberty. All right? What is that all about? And I always say that, individually, you can't have the understanding of true liberty without understanding the liberty that Christ brings in that whole essence of God's plan for salvation. So that's why I say libertarianism is anarchy, because pure libertarianism, and that's why I say the Koch brothers are useless, because their form of libertarianism is actually slavery. It has nothing to do with real liberty. Madison continues in 43, and I put a bunch of emphasis in here in the blog post when you read it, is a protection against invasion is due from every society to the parts composing it. The latitude of the expression here used seems to secure each state not only against foreign hostility, bold, expressive, but against ambitions or vindictive enterprises of its more powerful neighbors, and I put in, and corporations. The history of both of ancient and modern confederacies proves that the weaker members of the Union ought not to be insensible to the policy of this article. Protection against domestic violence is added with equal propriety. Man, we get that. This intifada, what you have on this anti-free speech stuff on colleges. Come on, folks. You know what? Don't play Congress, senators, congressmen, don't play games with what you think is going to fix it. Go to the Federalist Papers and go to the Constitution and the foundational framework and principles of truth to understand that those are insurrection and subversions. Fix it in statute, and then hopefully we can have a Justice Department that will carry out justice, because Madison talks about this. If you can't figure this stuff out, you're never going to get justice. And so what we have is these lefty weenies, commie beanies of the ACLJ and all of these other not ACLJ, the ACLU, the American Communists, what is that? ACLU, American Communist Legal Union, Lawyers Union, or whatever it is. Those ACLJ is a good folks. They're defending and fighting the right stuff for us. But you know what he talks about here is that you're not going to get any justice. He talks about it as well as at first view, it might seem not square to the Republican theory to suppose either that a majority have not the right or that a minority will have the force to subvert a government. You see, and that's what we have. We have the minorities out there. You have all of these little groups, these Black Lives Matters, the Antifas, all of the other weird hats that women are running around with, and odd clothing or none, and some of that other stuff. Those subversive minorities have no right to subversion. None whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, go to the blog post and read, what's actually there and see what you have. And as you start thinking about all of this, continue on insurrection and all of that. And I have to run it out and finish up here because I'm down to the last few seconds. Look, as they say, look, I'm here to point out that you clearly have to get back into constitutionalism. And all of you folks that call yourself elected officials, get it right. Get back to first principles And pulpits get back to not just the biblical first principle, but how it's extensible in everything in life, and quit running away from government and governance. You run away. You're cowards. You run away from from inside your pulpits. Ladies and gentlemen, come on back. Get active today. Get your feet on the streets like Sam Adams did. Use your minds. Use the words. Understand the truth.